Hi everyone, it's Rax. It's been a while since we made a YouTube video, but we're back in it. We're going to make a super important one today talking about endgame itemization. So many people are coming by the streams on YouTube and Twitch now, by the way. Thank you for being there, guys. Asking me questions about how would you prepare for Abattoir of Zir. Here I'm going to kind of recalibrate exactly how you might think about each item slot and getting ready for the endgame. We've got a ton of planners. Of course, we've got paint. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll know exactly what you need to do to get ready. One thing that I want to show you guys, which a lot of you may be very interested in. A lot of people in the last 4.5 years that I've made content, especially for Diablo, have asked, Rax, did you ever play RuneScape? Man, I love that game. How many thousands of hours do you have in that game, Rax? And it kind of surprises them to know I've never actually played RuneScape, but my friends over at Old School RuneScape reached out to me and said, Rax, we got something that we want to sponsor you for and show them. And they just started a brand new league. The new league is called Trailblazer. It just started in mid-November and it's going to last until mid-January. It's a faster paced version of Old School RuneScape. It's going to give you more power than you've ever had before. There's XP boosts, there's more loot drops, and there's powerful relics, which is going to offer you various buffs and abilities. It's going to speed up your process. It's actually going to change the way that you actually approach the game. The player counts are higher than they've ever been before. I've seen a lot of my friends on Twitch, when I fire it up or when I'm raiding somebody, actually playing this and having a lot of fun with it. So it might be time for me to jump over there and try it for the first time. That way I can finally say that I've played RuneScape. If you'd like to try it, the link is down below. And I'd like to thank OSRS one more time for sponsoring this video. So anyway, back to the planner here. Let me start with paint. I think this is the best place to start. And a lot of people are always talking about how much damage does their character do? Rax, how much attack power does your character have? My character has this much attack power. In my opinion, at least with itemization, building out your character, I put damage in last place. It really just doesn't matter. And by the way, two things I need to say. This is for the end game. This is for the hardest tier content. This is for the Abattoir of Zir and trying to clear level 25 in that. It's going to be way harder than Nightmare Dungeon 100, way harder than anything in the game. Some of this does not apply when you're going through the regular game. If you're just speed farming and deleting stuff, then stuff like, for example, movement speed, becomes a huge factor. But we're talking about the end game and trying to clear the hardest content in the game. Another thing that I will say is all the lessons here that I'm going to show you, they generally apply to all classes. If you follow this strategy for all classes, it would work 90% of the time, 95% of the time. But sometimes you got to break the rules. And in the first planner that I'm going to show you, we're going to break one of the rules and I'll show you why. But anyway, the thing that I would recommend, the first thing is don't think about damage first. Damage is not the way that you win in the endgame of Diablo 4. First of all, you got to be able to survive. You get hit one time, boom, you're gone. Remember, there's a timer in Abattoir of Zir. It's like a Greater Rift in Diablo 3. If you keep dying, well, I don't know if they're going to make you restart it after one death, but a couple of deaths might make you lose anyway. Another thing is people dramatically, they did this in Diablo 3 all the time, underestimate the value of the utility stats, the stuff that just makes your build work or just gives you tremendous quality of life. If you don't have these, not only is your build not going to work, even if it does work, it's not going to be fun to play. So I kind of have a hierarchy here where if I see a life roll, I always take it for defense. Life applies to everything. It helps you with stuff that does physical damage. It helps with elemental damage. It can synergize with a ton of different talents or paragon nodes or legendary powers. It can help your barriers. It can help your fortify. It can help your vampire powers like hemo. It is very difficult to find a better stat in the game than life. Armor percentage is going to be massive, and you're going to see me put a tremendous emphasis on this. So let's understand something. So I believe the cap for the most damage reduction you can get from armor is 85%. In the current state of the game, you can get enough armor to mitigate 85% of the damage from regular monsters pretty easily. But let's make an assumption. I believe the maximum level in Nightmare Dungeon 100 is monster level 154. If the Abattoir of Zir begins at level 1 at that difficulty, and then by level 25 each time it increases the monster level by 1, the final monster level would be somewhere around 179. If you plug that into the armor formula for Diablo 4, that would mean that in order to mitigate 85% of the damage, you would need about 15,000 armor. And I promise you, that is extremely hard to reach. I challenge you. Log into your character. How much armor do you have? I bet you it's not 15,000. I'll also bet you it's nowhere near 15,000. And this absolutely matters. Otherwise, something's going to hit you and you're just going to die. It's going to make a huge difference. This is the real end game. So armor percent is something that we're looking for. I like all DR, which stands for damage reduction. There are all these different cutie patootie stats. You can get like damage reduction from close, damage reduction from distant. In my opinion, I want damage reduction from everything. So that would count as things like damage reduction. Or let's say you're playing a ball lightning sorcerer with the firebolt enchantment and you always have things that are burning. Well, damage reduction from burning would pretty much be a universal DR, close to it anyway. So things like that. Finally, for classes that don't stack intelligence, because intelligence does give you some all resist, you need to max your resistances. And I don't think the resistances are equal at all. Here's a fun fact that a lot of the community, I think, just learned. At least I just learned this, and people are starting to talk about it way more. Have you ever done a dungeon and you get that green ticking damage that just vaporizes your life? Even if you have max poison resist, you're just like, oh my God, this does so much damage. It's unbelievable. Did you know that almost always that damage is not poison damage? It's actually shadow damage over time, or in some cases, physical damage over time. This was just recently discovered, and I think it almost always has that green color to it, which is extremely misleading. If it was shadow damage over time, I wish it was like purple, or if it was physical, it should be a different color. But anyway, even myself, I was of the opinion that poison DR or all resist is the most important. I actually think it's all the other ones. It's like fire, lightning. I don't think cold matters that much. So I think you can kind of skimp a little bit on poison and cold, but I think shadow, fire, and lightning you cannot skip on. So resists are going to be important. So that's defense. Utility, cooldown. This should be self-explanatory. You bring back your cooldowns a lot of times with legendary powers or passives. Your cooldowns, when you activate them, trigger this other thing, which give you this other buff that do this other thing. It's just massive to be able to mash your buttons as much as possible. And Blizzard keeps nerfing cooldowns, so it's kind of a scarce commodity. Anything for your resources. Having more resources, having them cost less, having the resource generation increase is is pretty massive in the game. You ever started leveling a druid? You throw one pulverize, melee, 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 another pulverize. Well, in the end game, we absolutely can't have that. We have to be able to keep attacking no matter what. Don't underestimate this. For builds that use Lucky Hit is super valuable. So kind of like vice versa over here in damage. I didn't put it here, but if you overpower is out of control. It's super powerful here. If you don't overpower, then it doesn't matter. If your build needs Lucky Hit, this is massive. Movement speed is great for farming, speed farming for most of the game, but we're talking about the end game, so you're not going to see me prioritize this at all. And then finally, over to damage. Your main skill, like ranks to Ball Lightning or ranks to Hoda, is probably the best, along with the main stat. Sorcerers want intelligence, barbarians want strength, rogues want dex, druids want willpower, necros want int. Did I say all the classes? If I forgot one, I'm sure someone's going to flame me in the chat for whatever it was. Critical strike, not damage. This is wrong. It's critical strike chance. Chance, not damage. Oof. Usually it's not critical strike damage unless it's a class multiplier. We'll get to this last. Attack speed is usually godly. The class multiplier is something like, for Hoda Barbs in the Paragon board, give you extra damage for every time you stack damage with Berserking. So then you just put damage with berserking everywhere. I'll show you this later. Another example would be Pulverized Druid. Pulverized Druid does damage with crowd control in like the most convoluted way. It's like it starts at a base of 10%, and then it gives you 20% of your damage to crowd controlled up to a 40%. So it's 40 minus 10, which is 30. And then it's 20% of whatever value gives you 30. So then it would be 150 divided by 5 is 30. So it's 150 damage to crowd control. I don't know. My brain just exploded, but we'll get to that later. All right. So that's a lot of talking, a lot of rambling. So how would I put together forget all the skills. Forget all the skills on the bar, forget the skill tree, forget the paragon, forget the enchantment slots, forget the legendary powers even. How would I look at itemization for a sorcerer? Well, one final thing is the helm, offhand, amulet, and rings. I'm going to look to put utility things on them wherever I possibly can. This is a ton of your itemization. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces are going for utility. In general, I get all my defense from my chest, pants, and boots. You can see there's only 2 spots where I really prioritize damage. That's weapon and gloves. There's going to be a little bit of an exception for ball lightning. So I go to the very first item, and you notice that we have the usual suspects. Cooldown and life are just godly everywhere. Pretty much if any single piece can take that, I take that every single time. The 29% armor, we need this to start to get to 15,000. Notice I'm going to take armor here, armor here, armor here, and armor even on my amulet, and look at my total armor. Where is it? 11,200. Oof. Remember, we needed 15,000. 11,200 is not 15,000. That's with taking it everywhere I possibly could. The maximum mana is nice. And again, it depends on the build that you're playing, but having more mana just means it's easier to keep throwing those ball lightnings. And then in your armor pieces, I think for every single class, I don't know if there's a single exception, you always take rubies. It's just percent life, which is like probably the best stat in all of Diablo 4. So we're going to take that every single time. Remember, the chest piece is all defense. Life, DR, armor, DR. I picked DR with burning because you would have the firebolt enchantment slot, light them on fire. Okay, then you get it. If you didn't have the firebolt enchantment slot that makes everything burning, you would slot that out for something else. Since ball lightning plays near everything, maybe you'd take damage reduction from close in that case. Okay, the gloves. The gloves, we are taking the gloves are one of the more offensive pieces, and usually on gloves are where you get your +4 to your main skill. But gloves only give you +4 to your main skill when your main skill is a core skill. Ball lightning is not a core skill, it's a mastery skill. So instead, this time, we have to put the ball lightning on the pants. So we'll pick up utility stuff like Lucky Hit and Chance to Restore Resource on Lucky Hit. A very underrated stat, by the way. I should have put that in my little paint chart. Chance to restore your 21% of your primary resource is massive, especially when you attack as often as ball lightning. But then we go for the normal offensive stats, critical strike chance, and attack speed. This is where you get a lot of your offense. Down to the pants. Pants are usually, just like the chest, quad defense. Always quad defense. People come here and they make the mistake on the chest piece all the time. They get tempted where there might be some damaging stat here, like I don't know, a frost shock skill damage or something, and they'll say, "Oh wow, yeah, I want 26% more damage. I need to do more damage." First of all, this is way worse than you think it is. This is just additive damage. Additive damage sucks in this game. They changed the formula where almost everything in the game is additive damage. That means it takes all of your additive damage, adds it up, and then it makes throws that into the damage calculation. Versus before, remember how they said vulnerable and critical strike were way too powerful? It's because they were separated. They were separate multipliers. But when they put it all into the big gigantic equation, it dilutes the value of all of those damaging stats. So I'm going to exaggerate here. This is not how it works, but let's just make something up. The way you can think about this, if this is doing like lightning damage, for example, is would you rather have like, I don't know, 4% increased damage, or would you rather have 10% reduced incoming damage? It's not even close. It's way better to go for the damaging stats, which is why on the chest we go for quad defense, and why on the pants we go for quad defense. Except for ball lightning, this is an exception. Remember how we said these rules work 95% of the time? Just ranks to ball lightning, we need this. This is just multiplicative damage when you just increase the value of your skill. So we'll lose one of our defensive stats here, but we're not giving up life, and we're not giving up the total armor, and we're not giving up the damage reduction that applies to absolutely everything. We'll give up the other stat to pick up the ball lightning, right? For the boots, now this is not how I would actually build a sorcerer, but this is how I build pretty much all the other classes. Sorcerers and necros are going to get a lot of all resist from just their Paragon board. The massive amount of intelligence they have is going to give them a lot of all resist. They probably shouldn't need boots that look like this. But the other classes that don't will need something. Remember, I do not think that the resistances are equal. I think that you can skimp on cold a little bit, and you can also skimp on poison a little bit, because remember, those poison ticks are not always poison ticks. It's very misleading. So lightning, fire, and shadow will be very strong to get you capped there. This should give you capped on those three for any class. And then here on a different class, you can actually pick in the sockets in your rings the specific elements that you don't have. So we have we have fire, lightning, and shadow on our boots. So in order to cap them over here, we would just pick up the other two. We could pick up a royal sapphire, and then we could pick up a royal emerald in the other ring, and bam, it would be done. It would be ideal, instead, to socket things with skulls at the bottom, 250 armor. Just remember, we are just desperately trying to reach about 15,000 armor so we can survive. So if you can use skulls and you can get the all resist another way, maybe in your Paragon board or something, that is helpful. So another thing to consider. But the boots should be the main place where you get most of your resistances. Occasionally in some other builds, they'll squeeze in a resistance roll, maybe on their chest or on their helmet or something. It's another defensive item, that's fine. But make sure your resistances are close to capped for the Abattoir. Your weapon, okay, I didn't do this. Your weapon is usually, first of all, your main stat. So you're going to go with int for sorcerers, and it would be something else for others. Another very important thing to get is all stats. And the reason why all stats are good is not only is it going to give you int for more multiplicative damage, but all stats, when you go to your Paragon board, okay, a lot of you probably don't know this. So the rare nodes on a Paragon board have a requirement to give you a bonus, right? Did you know that every time you add a board that you step away from the center, that the requirements get higher and higher and higher? So the order of the boards matter. You can't just Mickey Mouse pick your boards, ha ha ha, it doesn't matter. If you have some rare nodes that are super important, my dog's going crazy. Callie, come here. It's okay. Callie, come here. It's okay. Sorry about that. We're going to pet Callie with one hand while we do the video with the other. As you move away, the requirements get harder. So right now it costs me 170 willpower on the baseboard. Obviously can't move the baseboard. But if I put a board second or a board sixth, second I would meet the rare requirements easily, but on the sixth board it might be impossible for me to reach it. So another reason why this all stats node is very good, sometimes it can be the breaking point in you activating some of your rare Paragon nodes later on for the bonuses. Sometimes those bonuses are really good. So that's why all stats is good. And then here, I guess this would be a very good example where we can go to the class multipliers. So what the hell did I even mean by that? So let's go to Hoda. When we go into the Hoda board, there is a legendary node. So this one, Blood Rage. So killing an enemy has a 10% chance to grant berserking. Your damage is increased by 25% of your damage while berserking bonus. Okay, if you're going to give me, see that little X there, the little multiplicative sign? If you're going to give me multiplicative damage every time that I get the damage with berserking bonus, that you have just completely made my plan for my barbarian. Every single place where I can possibly get damage while berserking, I'm going to get it. Remember, goes back to that concept. Everything in a big additive thing, it dilutes it all. It's all garbage. Anytime you tell me you're going to give me multiplicative damage outside of it, all of a sudden you have my attention and I'm going to completely change how I'm thinking. So we go damage with berserking, 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 damage with berserking. It needs to be exactly that. Some people might be reading the guide and say, okay, yeah, damage with berserking is a pretty good stat, but oh, I'm Hoda. I can take damage with close instead, and it'll be about the same. No, it's not about the same. You need damage with berserking because of that Paragon node. What about if you're playing Pulverized Druid, Big Smash? There is a legendary node here. Let's see if I can find it. Found it instantly. I'm a god. Your Earth skills deal 10% multiplicative damage, increased critical strike damage, increased by 20% of your damage versus crowd control bonus up to 40%. Okay, so let's see here. We do 10% multiplicative damage, critical strike damage. We could get 40. The way that we get the extra 30 is it takes 1/5 of our damage with crowd controlled bonus. So what number divided by 5 is 30, 150? Okay, so then you might ask yourself, why the hell did Boiler put a staff? Well, a staff gives you 52% damage to crowd controlled enemies. And then you get the 36 roll on the thing. That's almost all that you need to satisfy that legendary Paragon node. So you might think, oh, he has a staff. I'll just go get some other two-hander and it will be fine. No, it's not fine. This is why some of these things are carefully crafted into these guides. Notice how there's damage to crowd controlled here. And notice how he doesn't have crowd controlled on the other ring. Why? Well, probably in the build, he reached 150 between the staff and the ring and something else is at 150. So you wouldn't need it on your other ring. But this is just an example of something that you need to be aware of when you're building your offensive stats. Whenever the Paragon node changes something to be multiplicative, you must be paying attention to it. You must know exactly what that stat is, and you must start stacking it everywhere. If you didn't know that, that's probably a big key for you. Okay, the focus. The focus is usually a very utility-based item. It's usually very important. First of all, it has a cooldown implicit on it. A lot of people are like, why don't you use the big two-hander? The big two-hander is nice, but the big two-hander costs you a legendary power. Here you can have two, but it is true that on the two-hander it has double the power. Do you want to double the power, or do you want to have two separate powers? Keep in mind, on a lot of these builds, they're telling you to wear Tibalt, you wear a Godslayer, your Shaco, here you wear a Raiment, here you wear a Banished Lords, here you wear a Talrashas. If you wear all of those, how many legendary powers did you just lose? Sometimes you cannot afford, like Necros, for example, are having this dilemma with Bone Spear. Do you use Grandfather or not? Because if you do use it, you lose two potential legendary powers, or you're going to lose your lidless wall. And that's a huge survivability thing. So it's not always clear, but a one huge selling point for using these foci, is that the plural? Focuses, foci, is the 10% CDR implicit on it. That's like the best stat in the game along with life. So it's CDR, CDR, mana and resource, which is mana again. It's like all utility, and then we slap critical strike chance on there because critical strike is so strong. Now we go to the rings. Rings, you can go life, crit, resource. It just has all the best stats from most of the things that we saw on the paint sheet. Damage to close makes a lot of sense for this particular build because you literally don't do damage unless you're standing next to them. So you get like full value out of that. So that's a pretty good roll. You could go for some other utility roll here as well, but something like that. And then you'll notice that the amulet is the only slot that I put a power on. It is true that amulets get a 50% bonus. Two-handers get a double bonus. Amulets get a 50% bonus and everything else is normal. But I want to draw your attention to one power in particular, Disobedience. Disobedience gives you increased armor. And if you slap this on your amulet after slaving away and trying to put armor, 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 putting the skulls in for armor, Paragon board armor, if you can give up the Banished Lords or if you don't have anything mandatory in the amulet slot, putting Disobedience here may be the way for you to reach 15,000 armor. I promise you, if you're thinking that that's not important, even after I reiterated it 5 times, it's important. If you don't have that, it is quite possible in these late levels of Abattoir, if you make it that far, you just cannot survive. It's just going to kill you. This is one of the great ways for many classes to consider if you can get rid of Banished Lords to reach that armor cap, the hard cap, soft cap, whatever you want to call it, for the 85% DR. And then here we can get $3 mastery skills. That's ball lightning. So that's incredible. And then it's all the same stuff. Armor, cooldown, mana cost reduction. Okay. I've been reiterating the same concepts over and over and over. I think you get it by now. But here's what I wanted to do with this video, guys. I wanted to show you, before I show you the full planners, I have a full Bone Spear Necro. I have a full Pen Shot Rogue. Twisting Blades might be better, but I'm going to play Pen Shot anyway. I have a full Pulverized Druid, which I'm thinking of respecking Shred, because there might be a bug with Shred where they might actually dominate Abattoir because one of their passives, Toxic Claws, considers the glyphs twice. And if you get the brand new glyph, which is going to give you the most damage of anything ever in the game twice, then Shred might clear it the best. I don't know. I'm talking to Boiler about it. He's theory crafting. Maybe Shred will be the best. I have a full Hodo Barb with a Grandfather. And of course, I got a full Ball Lightning Sorcerer. Remember the guy on YouTube that like 24 hours into the season made the video saying this is the new best build in the game and now everybody in the world's playing it? Oh, here we are. So I'm going to make all those guides. I'm going to show you how to do it. And I've been building them. They're very, very powerful. Anybody who's been watching the stream, my classes are just destroying everything. The main problem is 15,000 armor on every class. I wanted to make a video going through showing you the ideas. Remember, these utility and defense things are way more important than damage. When you're thinking about damage, make sure you remember the class multiplicative powers. If you get them in the Paragon node from a legendary node that turns something into multiplicative, it is super important. Pay attention to those little things. Life is the GOAT. 15k armor is what we need. All DR that always applies is super important. Make sure you get the resists. I think poison and cold, maybe a little bit on the back burner to the other ones. Cooldown is godly. Everybody understands that. More resource, lucky hit. Movement speed is kind of meh. For the end game, it's not really going to matter how fast you can move. It's going to matter, can you take a hit? And can you do enough damage? And can you actually play your build? It's going to be way higher than can you run a little bit faster? I'm 100% sure on that. I hope this video helped you. I'd also like to thank the RuneScape people. I have actually never played RuneScape, but I have heard in my teenage and adult life nothing but how much people love RuneScape. I think RuneScape is one of good friends with Darth Microtransaction. He tells me about how RuneScape is his happy place. It's his favorite game ever. All he wants to do is play RuneScape. People are actually infatuated with this game. So honestly, even though I've never played it, it makes me happy that there's new leagues for it and new ways to play it. Just love video games, man. Maybe I'm going to have to go in and try it. So I want to thank them for sponsoring this video, and I'm pretty sure some people are going to love that. Anyway, that's the video, guys. very soon, I'm going to show you my 5 setups for Abattoir of Zero, one for every class. You can copy them, you can ask me questions, and I hope that we can dominate it when it comes out. Let's see if Blizzard actually made a good endgame. Thank you.